Good afternoon, my friends. This is the Grimflare, and I hope you're all doing very well today. So, I booted up MTGO today with the plans on maybe taking a jaunt through the tourney practice lobby for some more adventures that we all love, but my client updated first, and I was like, I had kind of given up hope at this point. Like, well, I guess I might as well just check to see if the replays are back, even though I know they won't be. We'll just do our due diligence and we'll just check it out. But the replays seem to be back, so hopefully we won't have any technical difficulties regarding those, but I'm going to try to show you a full league in replay form all at once. So, apologies in advance for any technical difficulties. I did click through the start of each of these 5 matches and they all functioned, so I think we're going to be good to go, but we'll have to see how it goes. And you'll also have to let me know how this format works for you. Of course, this is my first time doing a full league in replay form, so it might be a little bit clunky. I'm like with other forms of content I've brought you, I'm kind of trial by fire, learning as we go. So let me know what you think about this. Since we're doing 5 matches back to back, we're probably also going to kind of skate by the sideboarding stuff. I think most of these matches are fairly meta, fairly tiered decks, so you'll probably more or less know what to do. We'll discuss sideboarding cards and decisions as they come up in the actual games. That's my plan anyway. If you have any questions about how to sideboard in these matchups, you can always ask in the comments below. So, yeah, I guess let's just get right into it. So, as you can see, this is from over a month ago now. That's how long we've been out in the wilderness without replays. But this was a friendly league, and let's see how it went for us. So the cool thing about this is this was over a month ago, like I said, and I haven't had access to the replays, so none of this stuff is at all fresh in my memory. So it'll be pretty cool to see how things go. This was a solid keep in a blind game 1. Definitely nothing at all wrong with this. And our opponent likes their 7 as well. So we, of course, lead off on the Treetop Village. Opponent's got the Bloodstained Mire they're cracking. Inquisition taking away our Lily the Last Hope. Alright, so Blood Crypt Inquisition could be Jund, could be one of the Faithless Looting decks of the format. We draw Scavenging Ooze. We're going to Brutality them back because whether it's Jund or a looting deck, the Skoos could potentially be very powerful, so we want to kind of clear the way for the Ooze here, make sure the coast is clear. And we see that it is Jund. They have a strong hand they have an Ooze of their own, they have a Bob, they have a K command, and a Lightning Bolt. Lots to worry about there, so we just take away their 2-for-1 with the K command. And, yeah, that's a very, very powerful hand, especially when you consider that they led on the T1 Inquisition. So they've got Twilight Mire into Dark Confidant. Hissing Quagmire is our draw, but decent in the matchup though it is. We've just got to take care of that Bob before he gets out of control. Now, we have a good hand too. We have a push for their Ooze. We'll see what happens. They've got an Inquisition, so there goes our push. They play the Ooze. And they still have a Lightning Bolt in hand. We draw Swamp. So I went ahead and fired up the Treetop Village here. Get across for 3 while I can. Running that Ooze out into Bolt just feels too bad to do. We want a window where we can potentially resolve that Ooze, whether it be through, discarding away their Bolt, or at least forcing it out of their hand with discard, or maybe something like that. But our window of opportunity is running out to do so, but we do have a Thoughtseize here. We might be able to make it happen. Here comes the Bolt in response, I assume, or maybe something else. They've found a Kolaghan's command buying back the Bob. Alright. And they're going to make us discard the Ooze. That is pretty rough. Quite bad for us. We will take away the Bob. And we'll continue to get in with the Treetop Village while we can. They've got the Lightning Bolt in hand. We can't even really afford to fire it up on defense. So the treetop is definitely making the best of a bad situation, but pretty poor position, all things considered. And drawing another land is not the solution we're after. We can't afford to fire anything up. We just have to let them go crazy with this Scavenging Ooze. So I went ahead and fielded the Raging Ravine here. That's a card we're going to have to deal with sooner or later. And then I'm going to fire up the Hissing Quagmire. What this is going to do is draw the Lightning Bolt out of their hand, and then potentially give us the ability to stick a threat of our own, or just start using the Treetop Village more safely. And of course we're just flooding, right? So it's just very, very bad here. But at least we're kind of racing them. You know, considering how poorly our draws have lined up, we're still kind of in it. Alright, we draw Bob. That's probably a little bit too late, but of course we'll give it a shot. I'm going to sandbag this land here. I have been. I'll continue to do so for all the usual reasons, and they have another Lightning Bolt, so they just kind of have it all, to be honest. These BGX mirrors often come down to just sticking that one threat that gives you recurring value. In this case, it's the Ooze. We've got a chump with a treetop. Alright, their Thoughtseize will blank at least. But they've got another Ooze. Yeah, and I mean, we just flooded. We just flooded. And that's the end of that. So we got wrecked pretty hard game one by Jund, but it was kind of on a knife's edge. Like, if they hadn't had that Kolaghan's command top deck that forced us to pitch our Skoos before we could play it, well, that would have been a very, very different game. We would have been fighting over the graveyard, we would have had a threat of our own, and we would have had the advantage of our manlands, whereas they only had one and we took care of it with a Field of Ruin. And I don't think it was incorrect to lead on the Thoughtseize and therefore get blown out like we did by the K command, because it's way more likely that they had a simple, you know, bolt or push or terminate or what have you in hand, you know, that we would have been very foolish to play out the Ooze first. So what can you do? Definitely just kind of like we were just one spell behind, basically, and that one spell turned out to be a Skoos when it was all said and done that was left standing, and that was all they needed to take care of us. So you guys know what to do against Jund. Out come our discard spells, in come all of the value pieces, including things like Fulminator Mage, anything that grinds. We want answers to stuff on board, and we want threats of our own. We don't want the discard any longer. So let's see what we can do here against Jund. We've got quite the hand. The big problem is that it only has a single black source, but otherwise this hand is absolutely stacked with just immense amounts of value. And once more, which seems to be a recurring theme, our BGX Mirror opponent has left in some discard, and they are rewarded for doing so. I continue to believe that is not correct. Assassin's Trophy is not a very good draw right at this particular juncture, because we don't need any more removal, and of course it's not great early game, but it'll be fine as the game goes on. And this is just brutal. What a good hand we have, but we can't quite play anything. By the way, guys, just in case you didn't know, this is the December update list, so it's not quite the most recent one you've seen. It's very similar, though, you know. Forgot to mention that, that's all. So, the decent thing about this clunk here is that we kind of already needed to deal with that Raging Ravine at some point, so that's kind of our consolation. We get to fix our mana, we get to deal with a Raging Ravine. And now we can kind of do a million different things. We can, we unfortunately can't play a Lily of the Veil anymore because they took her away, but Lily the Last Hope is never really a bad one. Fulminator Mage is an option, or we could honestly just pass with some instants up, but I think we're supposed to play to the board. Fulminator's my call. And here, so I chose to aggressively hit the land. That is debatable, right? That's debatable, but they haven't really done too much which makes me believe that they have planeswalkers and or Bloodbraid Elves in hand, so maybe, just maybe, we can, like, hitting a land can either strand them for a couple turns on, you know, being just shy of their mana that they need to play their powerful cards, and or, if nothing else, it gives us the very proactive play of Lily buying back the Fulminator next turn. So, but often you'll want to use that Fulminator as more of a Grey Ogre, at least for a couple turns, you know, pressure them a little bit, add to the board, and of course you can always sack in response to anything that goes on. So, definitely an interesting call there. I'm more likely to be aggressive like that on the play, which I am. So, you know, you could have gone either way with that, though. So, Jund opponent makes their land drop and just passes again. So here, yep, it's the Lily buying back the Fulminator, although Dark Confidant was a real consideration there, right? But I think the Fulminator value is too strong. They're going to bolt the Lily, finish her off. Sure, that's a win for us. We get to hold up Trophy and Decay here. And yep, looks like they did indeed have a Bloodbraid Elf. Which, aha, cascaded into a Fatal Push, which is a bit of a blank. So that's good for us. I was like, what happened there? Replay acting up, but nope, that was just a bit of a whiff. So that's a good time. Now we could trophy this thing, but I don't see the real need to. That was the first hit we've taken all game. Tireless Tracker, good card. Not great in this exact window, so pretty happy to just play Fulminator and pass. Now at this point, there's no need to aggressively use it, right? Because we know it can trade, we know it, or it can chump block, then get value. Now we're slow rolling it a little bit more. But yeah, looks like they've got just the chain of Bloodbraid Elves, which of course is incredible in this matchup. And Bloodbraid into Liliana. Well, they blanked on the first Cascade. The second one was a major, major hit. So they're going to tick up. Few different options here. I went with the Trophy. It's just like the least efficient card in many ways that's in our hand. We might still kind of be on a land destruction sub-plan, so not the worst thing in the world to refrain from ramping them. We'll take the block, and at this point their board is big enough and aggressive enough that I don't think I'm supposed to chump and then Stone Rain the Stomping Ground. I think I'm supposed to actually trade. And I'm glad that I didn't, because they just have more land drops to follow that up. Now we get to decay the Liliana of the Veil in the end step. Note that there was no need to do that in response or to do that right away. Like, we just conceal information by waiting to do that until the end step. They're down to 2 cards in hand, and we were hoping to draw a land there or a bomb, and I think it's safe to say we drew a bomb. So it's going to be the Nissa Vital Force, and now we just get to pressure them, and now they have a lot to deal with, right? They've got a really significant clock to deal with, and the Nissa herself is just obviously like an emergency must answer for them. Now maybe they can do it with, you know, Bloodbraid into Bolt or something, but we'll see. I'm just glad they didn't have a third Bloodbraid. That would have been a very clean way to go about removing her. Scooz went ahead and ate my Fulminator Mage. Then they're going to Fatal Push the land. Okay, they're down to 1 card in hand. We draw a Forest. Interesting, interesting. So, there's a couple options here. Of course, Tracker into Forest is so tempting, but I think the Scavenging Ooze is big enough that we are just kind of supposed to take care of it right now before it can untap and get 2 more activations and just become more of a problem. Also, this way, our Nissa gets to not just die to their attacks. They have to commit another resource of some kind if they want to take her off the field next turn. So, it's a bit risky to hang on to this combination of Tracker and land simply because we know they left discard in the deck, but I think we're still supposed to. We don't want to play her out as just like a Balduvian Barbarians, right? We want the value. We need the value in this type of matchup. So Nissa's down to 1. They found a Tarmogoyf. All right. What else did they find? Another Tarmogoyf. Well, now we're a little sad that we spent our Maelstrom Pulse last turn. That is for sure. But what can we top deck? We need some help. Fatal Push, that's a good start. That's a fine start. So, it's Tireless Tracker time. We'll get our clue. So what we get to do here is untap that land, but not attack. So this is going to kind of ramp us for a turn. We're kind of adding 1 mana to our opponent's entire turn, which of course is relevant with both push and clue on the field. And this also is representing perhaps a double block on the Tarmogoyf, or if nothing else, like an advantageous block that wards off the Bloodbright Elf. So usually when you +1 Nissa, you'll then turn the land you untap sideways, but sometimes you just have to, you're just back on your heels and you gotta play a little D. So both of these are coming at Nissa. And I think this is worth doing. Getting both Tarmogoyfs off the field this way, they're going to choose. They get to take care of the tracker or the land. Either way, we're going to use that land to push the other Goyf. So this way we actually get to keep our Nissa around. We get to trade 1 for 1 twice. Pretty good. Pretty good for us. They only have the card in hand that they just drew, and now we get to crack a clue, so we're pretty ahead still. And Nile, Spellbomb, and Dark Confidant are some pretty solid draws. So we'll play out the Spellbomb, then we get to untap that land. And we are going to adopt the role of aggressor, but not to the point where we're using Treetop Village, because of course we want to potentially cantrip with a Spellbomb. We want to play the Bob, all of the above. So I just went ahead and main phased the Spellbomb. See what else we can find. A fetch land, sure. Not the most exciting, but we've had some decent draws over the last couple turns, so opponent's just going to scoop to that. We're too far ahead. They just could never quite remove our Nissa. Nissa pretty much won us that game. We had a very, very powerful opener that we were not quite able to leverage the power due to some clunky color production issues, but Field of Ruin bailed us out. We were just kind of a turn behind still, but Field of Ruin got us going. Fulminator into Lily the Last Hope value was nice. We had plenty of removal, but then Nissa is what really took over the game. And, yeah, pretty comprehensive win, all things considered, over Jund in Game 2. So, moving on to Game 3. Once more with our deck chock full of threats and answers with no discard to speak of. And this is a hand with only 1 spell. Our opponent's going to mulligan, thankfully, so will we. They're going to keep 6. This is another spell light hand. But I think keeping this is certainly better than mulling to 5. But we don't have that much utility in our land base. We did bottom the Treetop Village. And it's just a bit shallow in terms of how much power this hand is bringing to bear, right? It's just a bit shallow, but top deck of the Lily the Last Hope was a good one. Jund does pressure your life total reasonably well, especially on the play, so for that reason, I will at least use 1 fetch early for an Overgrown Tomb. Scavenging Ooze, huh? Well, I don't like blindly running a creature out into a potential Liliana of the Veil Edict unless I have a Treetop Village down where I can kill her on the crackback and it's an even trade. Especially if I have something worth holding up, and in this case this Abrupt Decay is worth holding up. So I just pass. I don't see a need to run anything out. But being on the draw against Jund, a little bit awkward for that reason, and sure enough, they do have the Lily, so our caution has paid off. So this is actually quite a tough call, because all of these cards are good. I took a pretty risky line here of pitching the Verdant Catacombs. I know I'm going to need this Field of Ruin to deal with Raging Ravine at some point, and I don't want to lose anything else. Of course, the big problem with this line is it takes us off of double black, so I don't know if that was correct. I think I kind of have to pitch a land there, right? Like, this is all about trading resources. I don't want to voluntarily pitch a spell. All of my spells are good. And the Field of Ruin's good, so I think that was at least justifiable, but it was certainly a high-risk decision. So, and we are promptly punished for it by drawing in yet another thing that needs double black. Skoos was an option there, but I went with the Goyf just because there's no creatures to eat with the Skoos quite yet anyway, so we'll play the Goyf, I guess. They've got a Skoos of their own, sure. And they've got land number 4, but they didn't have Bloodbraid Elf or anything like that. Alright, here's another Skoos. Well, if we just had double black, things might be okay. But we don't. We didn't. Frankly, not sure why I didn't attack there. Oh, wait, yes I am. They could have eaten, they could have fetched, and then they could have eaten the Planeswalker in the instant and reduced my Goyf to a 1/2. So, it was not a safe attack. Alright, they'll bolt the Ooze, which is going to give their Skoos a little fuel, but same applies to my Tarmogoyf. And they found another Raging Ravine, so we're just kind of both in a holding pattern. Maelstrom Pulse, I mean, I'd way rather be having played a Planeswalker by now, but I'll take it. So it looks like they're going to shrink the Goyf here as to the best of their ability, which is the correct play. But when all's said and done, our Goyf is still a respectable 3/4, and you know the graveyard is going to fill back up in this matchup, so I'm feeling pretty good. If I ever hit a second land, I'll be in real business here. A second black source, I should say. Nissa Vital Force, well, pretty bad in this particular juncture, and I could have played the Ooze, but at this point I just know that I need the second black source at all costs, so I'm choosing to hold up the Field of Ruin, especially because now they're at a point where they can start animating Raging Ravines, but they don't. So just to fix my own mana, I get to pop a Ravine here. And they've got a trophy for the Goyf. Okay, so it's fine with me, because now we're really in business mana-wise, and I can finally start playing out my Planeswalkers. But I didn't. So why didn't I play out a Lily of the Veil there? Well, basically just because it is less mana efficient. We're going to have a 2-spell turn here if we want to, or we can just go ahead and play the, leverage the Ooze. They found a Bloodbraid Elf, though. Into Thoughtseize. Yeah, so I am punished for this. They'll take away the Nissa, though, which obviously is the most powerful card in my hand, and maybe they can't really beat her, so that's fine, but these Lilianas are at least a bit of a more immediate problem for them, so I'm going to go ahead and trophy, and then Tireless Tracker is my draw. Okay. We get to attack with the Ooze here because they can't really afford to block, because we have enough fuel in the yard that we can just spend our turn doing that and kill their Bloodbraid Elf without spending anything. They're wisely not going to take the block, so we'll just eat one thing. And look at the life totals, like, we are the aggressor, we definitely want to maintain that. And now we're going to go ahead and play out the Lily, the Last Hope. Just make sure we stay ahead. I'm not in need of edicting away this Bloodbraid Elf quite yet. It's not something that can really do much as far as blocking or threatening me goes. Like, it's just gonna go ahead and take our Lily out. That's totally fine. We've got a Tarmogoyf in hand. Life is good. So we'll draw Maelstrom Pulse. Alright. The other reason I haven't been as excited to play the Lily of the Veil here is that I've consistently had card advantage, and I've had a hand that's clunky enough that I'm not really ever not gonna get away from that card advantage. So I can edict something and that's fine, but then ticking up might do more harm than good, right? So I'm pretty happy to just, like, not play that Lily, at least for now. So now it's a decent time to play her. Like, again, she might just sit on one from here, or she might tick up and do a little bit more harm than good, but at this point we just need to use our mana effectively. Now they're firing up their Raging Ravine on the attack, not exactly what I expected to see, but I guess they felt obligated to deal the Liliana, and let's see what else they have. They've got a Dark Confidant. Alright, that's not exactly going to do it for them, because we just get to go ahead, pulse him away, and that's game. We get to swing for exactly lethal with a gigantic Scavenging Ooze. So the key there was simply the amount of card advantage we had. Like, our decision to hold the Field of Ruin and pitch the Verdant Catacombs proved to be a poor one. It proved to be a poor one. It clunked up our progression for way too long, but our opponent, frankly, flooded out a bit. They flooded, and they were not ever really the beatdown there. They were not really ever the aggressor. Therefore, they couldn't leverage their flood in the form of Raging Ravines very well, and we just, frankly, had a lot of very, very powerful spells in hand. We had a lot of very powerful spells throughout the entirety of that game. And while there were one or two windows where it looked like it was going to become a bit of a contest, really we just had a high enough density of spells that we were, most reasonable sequences that we took in the latter half of this game would have got us there. So that's actually one reason I'm not always the most thrilled to play these BGX mirrors. Sometimes it just comes down to draws more than it seems like it should, right? But anyway, that started us off at 1-0 in that league, so good times. On to game 2 we go. Our opponent's on the play. They'll keep 7, and so will we. Our hand is, it's got a bit, we're a bit heavy on lands, especially because we top-decked one for turn 1, but hey, at least we've got a couple of creature lands, we've got some utility, so we'll lead on the Inquisition, and we are filled with dread when we see the card Valakut the Molten Pinnacle in the opponent's hand. This is Scapeshift, or Titan Shift apparently, with the Primeval Titan there. So this is one of our worst matchups, arguably our actual worst tiered matchup. Living End might be worse, but Living End is not much in the meta right now. Titan Shift is. So, obviously we only have one take, it's the Sakura Tribe Elder, and to be honest, it might be the one we would have taken with a Thoughtseize anyway, because they have 2 win conditions in hand, but they have no ramp. If we take the Tribe Elder, they have no ramp at all, right? So, they're going to fetch on the end step, and then they're just going to play a Windswept Heath, so that wasn't in their hand before. We know they've got nothing else going on. And we draw Tarmogoyf, which is pretty much exactly what we needed to draw, frankly, to have a good shot in this game, because we've got a clock. We've got a clock. And they're going to expose the Valakut nice and early, which is sometimes risky, but perhaps not that risky game 1, right? So there's not, unfortunately, all that much we can do here besides continue to deploy threats. Our second threat and our third threat, the Ooze and the Treetop, being a lot more underwhelming than the first because they both require a bit of mana investment to become reasonable. But hey, we're just kind of putting creatures on the field and planning to turn them sideways. So once again, our opponent plays out a land that we didn't know they had. Like, they could have played something else, but I guess they're, who knows, maybe that is the right land to play. But they're not really concealing information, are they? So, not that we could do anything differently, even if they weren't, because we are just drawing nothing. That Tarmogoyf was a pretty good draw, but we've just got nothing going on. We're just drawing lands, and we're just kind of turning everything sideways in the hopes that it gets us there. But you know what? This is lethal. They're facing lethal. So we'll play out yet another creature land and pass. So we've kind of cobbled together a somewhat respectable clock, and they just haven't had any ramp spells, and they just scoop it up. They don't have anything. I don't know what they could have really had there. They can't combo off this turn, obviously, because they haven't, they haven't hit enough land drops. They haven't hit enough cards like Sakura Tribe Elder and Explore and all of these things. Search for Tomorrow. But I guess what I was worried about there was maybe some kind of value card that might be in the main deck or some kind of main deck removal. But even so, we just kind of snuck a win. So we didn't do anything very impressive. We took the only card that was a legal take with Inquisition. Then we literally just played threats out and turned them sideways. That's all we could do. We did have Assassin's Trophy as a potential out to Primeval Titan, who would not have killed us when he came down. So there's that. But even so, we're definitely lucky to take a game 1 off of Titan Shift like that. It was a reasonable keep for them. Our Inquisition was very timely, but perfectly timed. And then they just were quite frankly unlucky to only hit land drops. Now that'll happen to them. They're like their land count is in the mid to high 20s, but still a bit unlucky. And they're going to take a mulligan in game 2, which is a great sign for us. Our hand is fine. A turn 1 discard spell would improve this hand markedly, but we do have some tools. We do have a little bit of hand disruption. We do have a clock. We do have some advantage. It's just, and we do have a sideboard card in the form of Surgical. So it just still might be a little bit too slow on the draw, but hey, it worked out okay for us last game. So Kitchen Finks, sure. Not the most exciting sideboard card, but in this matchup, you bring in some stuff that's not necessarily the greatest, just because you might have worse cards in the main deck. And staying above that threshold of 18 life is pretty important. In a lot of games, and Kitchen Finks can help with that. It's also just another clock. As we saw, some underwhelming components of the clock can still contribute to a turn 5 kill. So Tarmogoyf is the play here, simply again by virtue of the importance of the clock. You might be tempted to play Dark Confidant there, but I don't think it's correct. They've got a Prismatic Omen, and they punted pretty hard here. This is not something you'll usually see in a league match. But they fell for the old bolt the 3 toughness Tarmogoyf trap, and of course with no instant in the yard, that does not quite suffice to kill the Goyf. It just makes him angry. It just makes him angrier. So here we could have done a couple things. We could have played the Bob. We could have played the Tarmogoyf as well. We could also have considered pulsing the Prismatic Omen, because that's going to grow the Goyf by 1 by putting enchantment in the yard. Prismatic Omen is basically letting them combo off probably a turn earlier at this rate. I chose to play the Kitchen Finks, though, just for the sake of mana efficiency. I'm hoping to basically draw a land next turn and have a double spell turn, potentially. And the Finks is actually as good of a clock as the Goyf is right now, as things stand. So I think that was a reasonable play, but you could have done a couple different things there. They've got a Tireless Tracker, so this is what I mean about them having some value pieces, but ooh, no land to follow it up. So I have to say, very unlucky for our opponent. Game 1, they got all of the lands and none of the ramp spells, and they were just a little bit too slow. We were just a little bit too fast for them, let's rephrase. Here in Game 2, they're stuck on 3 lands. That is completely awful for them, completely awful. We'll see if they want to take a trade here of their own volition. With the Kitchen Finks, that would have been great for us. Deathmark was a fine draw because it lets us have a double spell turn here. And they're just going to scoop to that. They presumably didn't hit a land drop yet again, and that's just going to do it. So I guess that's an example of how we can beat even our worst tiered matchup. Now, like I just said, we needed to ride our luck. We needed them to have some pretty poor progressions, and they did. They did. They'd had some pretty poor progressions. They also made the mistake of bolting the Goyf when it was not sufficient to kill the Goyf. all that's true. Still, you know, all we can do is play to our outs, and in both cases, our out was, well, let's play our fastest clock on turn 2, and then hope they stumble and interact as well as we can from there. And it ended up getting us there, so I'm not gonna be too mad about that one. So win against Titan Shift advances us to 2-0 in the league. And then we move on here to Game 3. Let's see. So this is the mono threats hand that we opened with here. And obviously that's not ideal, right? Obviously that's not ideal. There's basically no matchup in which we're like, yes, I want only creatures and no interaction. Like, our creatures get better when we interact. However, perfectly balanced hand, blind game 1. I don't think I'm supposed to throw that one back. Especially on the play, these threats could prove to be quite nice. So, seeing Mountain, I'm compelled to play the Inquisition because I just assume my Tarmogoyf is going to die to a lightning bolt if I run it out. And I'm correct because they bolt me in response. So we see a couple of Bedlam Revelers and a Tormenting Voice. So this appears to be a mono-red Arclight Phoenix deck, possibly with Runaway Steamkin. Remember, this was a month ago, so I think the Steamkin builds have fallen out of favor, but they were a little bit more common at the time. But with the Revelers, this looks like some kind of mono-red grindy deck, probably with Arclight Phoenix. Especially this Tormenting Voice is a good sign for that, so that's what we're assuming. Just like in our last match, we only have one legal take, so that's the take that we'll go with. And our opponent's got a really scary top end if they can ever get there, but for now, doesn't look like they're quite close to getting there. And we have such a threat-dense and redundant hand with so much value of our own that I just did the mana-efficient thing there and played out the Tireless Tracker. Obviously, in most situations, you don't want to play her without a land to follow her up, but in this situation, I think that's perfectly acceptable. So now we get to go ahead, get our value, get in with her. So here, we play out the Skoos for sure, and then we could play the Tarmogoyf as well, but I think we're just supposed to leave the Skoos here for this turn. Number one, we want to keep their graveyard clear to keep these Bedlam Revelers in their hand as long as possible, and indeed, ideally forever. Number two, we can, bluff interaction, we can potentially crack the clue, but lots of reasons not to play the Goyf there, basically. Looks like they're on the dig, they're looking for some stuff, looking for some action, maybe they have some and they're setting up an Arclight Phoenix turn. Burst Lightning. Yep. So I will be keeping their graveyard as clear as possible before my Skoos is going to die. But that's all they really have, that turn at least, so good enough for me. We'll make some more clues. We're going to crack one in the main phase looking for some action. Something proactive to do. That's not it this turn, but that'll be way more value next turn. So this tracker is becoming a reasonable clock, and now it is time to play the Tarmogoyf. Now we're going to really amp up the clock, and we don't have anything to do it by way of interaction that matters much anyway. So rather than hold up Fatal Push or Clue, I think we should just play the Goyf there. And they did manage to get enough things back in the yard to play a Bedlam Reveler. They pitched the other Reveler, they pitched an Arclight Phoenix and a Mountain. So that's all pretty fine for them. I am happy to not have to deal with another Reveler though, so that's good enough for me. We got another Tarmogoyf. Alright, that's pretty solid actually. We get to make 2 clues, which is also quite nice. Respecting our life total, we'll get a basic, we'll crack a clue. And now both of these things can get in uncontested, so that's precisely what I'm going to do. Inquisition, huh? Alright, so they're down to 3. we could play Inquisition and hold up Fatal Push, or we can play another Goyf, and Goyf just lines up so well against their deck that I think I'm just supposed to play the Goyf. And yeah, they had to come up with something really good despite that refuel they got from Reveler to stay in the game there, and they did not have enough. So against these mono red decks, Tarmogoyf, and also Tireless Tracker once she gets a few clues sunk into her, they're almost too big for these decks to handle in a lot of situations anyway. So we didn't see all of what they're up to. Again, a month ago especially, these builds were all in flux, but we do know that it's mono red. We do know that it is an Arclight Phoenix deck. So siding accordingly, we're kind of treating it a little bit like Burn with recursion and graveyard shenanigans, and of course we still need to deal with some bigger top-end stuff than we would need to worry about in Burn, but we have to respect our life total for sure against a deck like this. So this hand has got the graveyard interaction. It's a well-balanced hand. It's got some answers. It's got a threat, so it's a keep, but it's looking a little bit clunky on the draw. It is a clunky one, no question of that. So they get to loot away a Mountain and an Arclight Phoenix right away. So I chose to run out the Spell Bomb here. There's an argument for playing Treetop Village as well, maybe protecting the Spell Bomb from an Abrade or something like that, but I'm pretty happy to just throw that out there, and if I need the really, not only was it mana efficient, it's also nice that if I need to crack it without the cantrip here to keep the Phoenixes off my back, I can do so. So they got the Fiery Temper. That's some value. But they've got an Arclight Phoenix coming back, and their graveyard is gigantic. Their graveyard has 7 cards, including 2 Faithless Lootings that can be flashback, and of course the Arclight Phoenix that's about to enter. So I'm pretty happy saying, yeah, I'll go ahead and forego my draw to say no to all of the above. Immediately afterwards, I draw a Surgical Extraction. So that would have been nice last turn, but at the same time, I'm actually pretty happy with how things have played out here. Pretty happy with how things are going. Opponent just kind of cantripped with the Monomorphose and then didn't have anything else to do. Alright, fair enough. So our mana is slightly awkward. These Fields of Ruin are not accomplishing much. And in this situation, so last game I was flush with threats. This game I'm not. I still only have my Tireless Tracker as a threat, so I'm definitely not exposing her without the follow-up land, and I'll take that chance to play the Treetop Village. We're holding up a lot of good stuff here, and our opponent's just kind of making land drops and passing, which is fine with me. It is now Tireless Tracker time, and here, as much as it's unfortunate to have to shock that in, partially because we're paying 2 life and partially because we don't get to play a second Treetop, I think we have to. I think we have to hold up the Spellbomb cantrip. So they're going to Abrade, and yeah, you know, this lets them kind of clear the way for a potentially decent turn next turn, but we get our value out of it for sure. They had to spend a spell on it. We get to cantrip. We get to take at least that Monomorphose out of the yard. And thanks to the power of Surgical Extraction, we are not shields down. However, they do have a Burst Lightning for the tracker. So our threat is not quite around anymore, but we did find a replacement. There's a Tarmogoyf in hand, and they go digging yet again. And once again, they just kind of Monomorphose once and then pass. So that's fine with me. We don't have anything super appealing in our hand right now, so I'm pretty happy, besides the Tarmogoyf that is, so I'm pretty happy to lead on that clue. Liliana the Veil's a decent draw, but I think I would rather Edict with her at this point. So I'm pretty happy to use that window for another Treetop Village and play the Goyf. The Goyf is up out of a lot of red burn spells reach. They're going to loot with Tormenting Voice, and Another Monomorphos. Monastery Swiftspear. Yep, you got it. Cannot attack. And the Goyf is now a nice, healthy 5/6. And now we have a good, clean target on the field to Edict. So we'll Edict. And it's time to just get really aggressive here, in my opinion. They could have a bolt or something for the Treetop Village, but that's totally fine with me. We've got another one where that came from, and I'm pretty happy to just add to the clock here if I can. They are paying some life, and they're going to... Oh, this is kind of rough for them. They're going to dismember the Treetop Village. So they're going to pay 4 to do that, and they're going to get hit for 5 by the Tarmogoyf. And they haven't even dealt with the problem of manlands, because of course we have another one on the field, and then a third one that they don't know about in hand. So, feeling really good here. Let's see how they can... how deep they can dig with looting. They pitch a couple extraneous lands, which is good value, but they've got problems. They've got problems right now. They've only got 1 card left in hand. I'm pretty happy to force it out of their hand, even though, yeah, I'm sure they have a way to use it, and it's a bolt on the Lily, so fair enough. I'm going to pitch the Maelstrom Pulse there. We have Assassin's Trophy as, at this point, a cleaner answer to basically anything they could have, simply because it's lower cost and instant speed, and we no longer care about ramping them at all. And now we just get to play out a bunch of really strong stuff. We get to fire up the Treetop Village yet again. We're crashing in for 9. We have double 6/7 Goyfs on the field. It's over. It is over. Surgical in hand, too, for good measure. That's it. All right. Pretty crushing victory, to be honest, over this mono-red Arclight deck. You know, we had good draws. We had a double Spellbomb opener, and we didn't really have threats. We were a little bit slow, too. The decision, though, to play the Spellbomb on turn 1, first of all, and then to crack it for no value on the opponent's turn 2, that is where the game was won, in my opinion. That is where the game was won. It could have been tempting, perhaps, to just say Treetop Village go, and then they get to just get an Arclight Phoenix back on turn 2. They have a full graveyard, and who knows what happens from there. So we had the luxury of not being afraid to cash in a Spellbomb without getting the draw because we had a second one in hand. That was a nice luxury to have, and obviously the progression was pretty good from there, where we got our value out of Tireless Tracker, and we immediately found another threat as soon as the Tracker was taken care of, and we just kind of overpowered them from there. The Tarmogoyf. Very, very hard card for their deck to stop. So we moved to 3-0 with a pretty dominating display against the mono-red Arclight Phoenix deck. Moving on to game number 4 in this league. Hope you guys are enjoying this format. Like I said, it's my first time running back a full league through the replays. It's a lot of talking, but that's why I've got my coffee here. So we're on the draw with this hand, and this hand is actually quite appealing in a blind game 1. Thoughtseize and Inquisition obviously are discard. If we don't know what we're up against, it's arguably the thing we want to see the most is some discard spells. We hit a second land drop and we are off to the races, so this is a risky keep for sure, but it's a very powerful keep if the risk pans out. And I kept it. I did indeed keep it. Spire Bluff Canal into an opt is Storm. Almost certainly. But we're going to find out. We're going to find out beyond a shadow of a doubt. We're going to lead on this Inquisition. Obviously, there's some thought to playing the Hissing Quagmire, but being on the draw, I think we have to disrupt them now, especially because we don't have a clean answer to the cost reducers, and especially because we have another really good play next turn. If we don't hit a third land, we can just Hissing Quagmire Thoughtseize, right? So we're in Inquisition, and we see a hand without the Mana Bear that we were a bit afraid of, but with double Ritual, Gifts Ungiven, 2 more lands, and a Grape Shot. Well, we're going to take the Grape Shot because their hand is a little bit too redundant otherwise. I don't think taking a Ritual accomplishes very much there, because they're hitting their land drops, they're not likely to be mana screwed, and of course we have to take the Gifts Ungiven with our Thoughtseize, right? So if we had another Inquisition, then maybe we say, alright, we'll take both your Rituals and try to take it from there, but I think the play there was just simply to take away their Grape Shot. Alright, so we didn't draw a land, so it's Thoughtseize time. And we see that they found a Monomorphose. Well, that's actually a pretty good draw. We still have to take the gifts, though. Shivan Reef into Opt, and we continue to not hit land drops, so a bit of an open question here as to whether to play Tarmogoyf or Dark Confidant. I advocated playing the Tarmogoyf when choosing between the two against Scapeshift, and I think that's correct. For a similar reason, you could play the Tarmogoyf here, because the clock is paramount. Goyf is by far our best clock, right? The problem, I shouldn't say the problem, I don't think that's really wrong per se, but the difference is that our disruption against Scapeshift, especially game 1, is medium at best. Like, sometimes our discard spells, our Inquisitions can whiff. Sometimes our removal spells don't do anything, etc., etc. All of our disruption is live against Storm, all of it. And it's more important to disrupt them because they can really be ground to a halt if we disrupt them heavily, whereas with Titan Shift they just keep playing lands and then we eventually die to a top deck if we haven't clocked them quickly enough. So I think playing Bob here was correct, even though he's the worst clock, because number one, he's still a clock. He's still going to get in for 2 every turn of this game until it's over. And number 2, we've got such good disruption in hand in the form of Liliana the Veil, we just really want to make sure we hit our 3rd land drop, and we have a lot of really live draws. You know, just the more cards we see in this matchup, the better, which is why I went with the Bob there. Opponent did not hit a 4th land drop, they just are going to pass, and we did hit our 3rd land drop, so start off by attacking with the Bob, but then it's just gotta be land into Lily. They're going to respond with a Pyretic Ritual, which probably means they have a 4-mana spell. Gifts Ungiven is the big scary one, and they sure have it. So they show us a pile of double Ritual and Monomorphose Past in Flames, which is kind of a typical pile. Them doing this is a little bit in response to the Lily is interesting as opposed to on the end step, but who knows. And I chose to bin the Rituals because they are kind of choked on mana now, right? Like, we know they have another Ritual in hand, but I think that's still the correct choice there. They are a bit choked on mana. They don't have a cost reducer. They haven't hit their 4th land drop. And Assassin's Trophy is quite bad against them, so especially because we have another one, that's what we'll pitch. And they're going to pitch a Monomorphose. So giving them a Monomorphose was seemingly a correct decision because they chose to pitch that over the other Ritual that's still in hand. So they're opening on the Monomorphose. Monomorphose into Pyretic. Into Desperate Ritual. Into another Desperate Ritual. I think they did the splice thing there, so they've got enough Rituals to go off with Past in Flames, so it's pretty bad for us. I'm just gonna hit play here and let them do the damn thing because they sure did it. They sure did it. That finding another Gifts Ungiven for them was pretty good there. It was pretty good, and they didn't even need to put together that large of a Grape Shot to get us, right? So I'm sure they could have mustered a bigger one if they needed to. So That's a bit rough. Missing that third land drop was a bit rough, so we couldn't play Lily on curve, but then again, we kept a one-lander. So, not like I have anybody really to blame for that. I think it was a justifiable keep without knowing the matchup, and I think it's a justifiable keep even if I had known the matchup. Like, all this stuff's really good against Storm. We just couldn't quite curve out in time to stop them from assembling their combo through some reasonable disruption. So that game was actually very close in my opinion. Like, if our Lily had come down one turn earlier, or if they had just not found the gifts quite so soon, maybe a turn or two later, I think we could have got them. I think we would have taken that one. But it was not to be. So against Storm, I like to bring in most, but not quite all of my graveyard hate, because a lot of the Storm players will move away to some degree from their graveyard matter stuff. And this is why it's a tough call, because a lot of them, it's gonna vary. It's just gonna vary. Some of them will go as all in as possible on the pieces of the puzzle and empty the Warrens plan. Some of them will just side in like a piece or two of those things and still be really heavy on Past in Flames and Grape Shot, and then there's everything in between. You even see some Storm players playing some alternative win cons like, Thing in the Ice or Pyromancer's Ascension or things like this. So it's a little bit hard to know precisely what to do. Therefore, I bring in, like I said, most but not all of my graveyard hate, and I up my outs to the Empty the Warrens token. So we already have a Maelstrom Pulse main. We want the other one, for example. We want Engineered Explosives, things like this. So obviously we bring in more, any hand disruption we have, that's all good. We cut away stuff like Assassin's Trophy and Abrupt Decay. Hand is pretty great, to be honest. This hand is pretty great. We've got a little bit of everything besides an out to Empty the Warrens and a clock. But Liliana suffices as a good enough threat. If we can just find a third land for her, we might be in business. And we see a 4-lander with 2 Grape Shots and a Baral. That's a pretty terrible hand, to be honest. But it's a functional hand, and I understand them not wanting to mull it against us. But that hand is quite bad. And we find a Dark Confidant, so that's a pretty decent one. Obviously, we can't quite play it yet, so I guess we just Inquisition here, and we see that they found a Goblin Electromancer. Well, once again, we will take away the... Okay, yeah, there we go. We'll take away the Bear. We're still hoping for an untapped land next turn, probably, so we can go for the Lily. So here, I chose to run out the Surgical Extraction on their draw step, try to get rid of all their Grape Shots, which I thought was a pretty good play. We know we trade evenly on cards. It's obviously very tempo efficient because it doesn't cost us any mana, and we get to not only take away a win condition completely out of their deck and their graveyard, but we get to see exactly how they sideboarded, which, as I just mentioned, it's not always clear, right? So we also see they drew a Serum Visions for turn. Okay, sorry, so yeah, that's why I confused myself a little bit, why I stumbled over my words last turn. We did not, in fact, take the Mana Bear. We took away a Grape Shot, and then we extracted it. Right, got it. Sorry, misspoke. So let's take a look at how they boarded. They have 3 copies of Empty the Warrens, so they're pretty heavy on that. They also have a Noxious Revival, which is, that this could be a main deck card actually, but either way it's pretty good against our forms of disruption. They still have access to two Past in Flames. They brought in 3 copies of Pieces of the Puzzle as well, which is a very good grindy value card against us. They have 3 copies of Remand, which I know is not very common in Storm main decks, so I want to say that at least some of these came in from the side too, but you never know. Maybe they're just playing more Remands than average. So they've got a lot of really good stuff to do against us. This particular Storm player 75 has a lot that's good against us, so we do get to extract the Grape Shots though. Alright, we know about the Electromancer still in hand that's not over there visible. And, ooh, see, this is a bit rough when we can't hit our Lilion curve for the second game in a row. This time it was not as the result of a greedy keep either. We just failed to hit our land drops, but Bob is still really good. They play that Goblin Electromancer. And Bob shows us Tracker and Treetop Village. Quite brutal once more to miss the window for Lily. But we will Fatal Push. We will crack them for 2. We do get to play a Nile Spellbomb and a Treetop Village, so it's still a pretty good turn, but yeah, we'll have to see. And they're just finding lots and lots of mana bears, which is frankly okay with us. It's better than them finding something like Pieces of the Puzzle. So there's our Choke, which is a borderline card to bring in, but I did bring it here, at least while I'm on the play. And they have a Remand also in hand for the Liliana, so that makes the Brawl really nice, actually. And of course, this guy's a 1/3, so he walls off our Dark Confidant. So we are extra punished for having missed our 3rd land drop on curve because we got our Liliana remanded. Remanded for a great amount of value, too, off of the Brawl. And then they found a Gifts Ungiven. Oh, man. Pretty bad stuff, to be honest. Oh, sorry, they found a Pieces of the Puzzle? I should not have clicked through that as quickly. Yeah, that was a Pieces of the Puzzle. And another Pieces of the Puzzle. Well, that we just got completely buried. We just got completely buried in card advantage. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not maintaining that that revealed card section for this game. Their draws, like these couple turns worth of draws for them, have been very nutty. I didn't think that Baral would be an issue, but when he got the value off of a 1-mana remand that lets him loot, and then he got to have a doubles Pieces of the Puzzle turn, that was just a completely savage turn. So their graveyard is gigantic enough, and there is a Past in Flames there that I think I'm supposed to just clear it out while I can, while it's clean. You know, I get my value off of it, and I do get to cleanly push that Baral. Once more, we don't get to run out our Lily, and the green of Treetop Village is a little awkward because it doesn't let us Inquisition as well. But we know they've got all kinds of stuff in hand. So I went for the Collective Brutality drain here. Pitching the Choke, I think Choke is past its usefulness. They've got 3 non-island sources on the field. So we saw a whole bunch of rituals. We took away a Gifts Ungiven, but they've got another one. Might be tough for us to win through double gifts. And of course this Inquisition is not great. And that's actually why I felt I had to play the Collective Brutality there instead of playing a Liliana, because Gifts Ungiven is the card I can't really beat, right? So I had to play the card that could take away the gifts. They had 2 copies. What are you gonna do? So I've got to just play out my threats. Nothing else there is particularly great. I don't think Inquisition for a ritual accomplishes anything of note. And yeah, they just get to gifts on the end step. I mean, you know, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I should have tried to take a ritual and see if it mattered, but I truly don't think it does. So they show me 2 more rituals, empty the Warrens, and Past in Flames. So I just put the rituals in the yard. At this point, though, I think more or less no matter what I did there, I was dead. But, you know, without like Surgical in hand or something, or mana for the Scavenging Ooze, I just don't think I can beat that graveyard when they have access to a lot of mana plus Past in Flames. So we're just going to let them go to town here. Or maybe this is where our replay function fails us. Yeah. Looks like this is where the replay gets a little bit overloaded by all the storming off going on the other side of the table, but suffice to say, they killed us. They didn't even do it with Empty the Warrens, as I recall. I think they just went off and they just cast another gifts, and they eventually just grape shot at us, if I recall. Again, this was over a month ago, but I vaguely remember thinking, okay, maybe all they've got is the gigantic board of goblins, and then we have at least 2 shots at hitting a Maelstrom Pulse. Nope, we just died. We just didn't get to untap. So we got wrecked pretty hard by Storm, and again, specifically here, I think those their opening hand was quite poor. They kept finding mana cost reducers, we kept answering them, and then they found a third one, and it was in the form of another Baral. Didn't think it was going to matter, but then when they remanded our Liliana is when all the bad stuff started, and they found a Gifts Ungiven right away, they found 2 pieces of the puzzle, and then they found some Gifts Ungiven off of those. That was just way too much value and efficiency for us to fight through. So, a bit unlucky here, perhaps, to not be able to play our Liliana under the remand, which could have really changed the texture of the game. However, that'll sometimes happen. We can't curve out perfectly every game, right? And even though we had a pretty strong progression with a decent amount of discard, we had answers, we had graveyard hate, it just wasn't enough. It just wasn't enough pieces of the puzzle value into Gifts Ungiven value buried us. Now, if you saw anything I could have done differently there, as always, let me know. But yeah, we got 2-0'd by Storm, which takes us out of the running for a 5-0 in this league, unfortunately. But we've still got Game 5, Match 5 to get through here. So let us see how we did. Blind Game 1. This hand is alright. It's not good, but it's alright. And I kept it. Basically on the power of, even though we're a bit flooded already, we have 3 pieces of utility, and that's great. Out of our land base, we have 2 man lands and a Field of Ruin, the power of turn 1 Thoughtseize as well, and we are against Storm yet again. So, good times. We see a very spell-dense hand on the other side of the table. Unsubstantiate's an interesting one, and then they have a couple Monomorphos, a Serum Visions, and a Grape Shot. I went ahead and took away the Serum Visions because it's just it's the one card they clearly want to play proactively, even disregarding the fact that it's their only 1 mana play, right? It's the one card in that hand that they clearly want to play proactively and will get value out of it, basically no matter what happens next or no matter what I'm doing. So I think that was a fine take there. We draw an Assassin's Trophy, which is a miserable draw in the matchup. All we can really do is play out a manland and pass. And looks like that's all they can really do too, is land and pass. And we draw Fatal Push, which is not nothing, but not entirely great either. And this is usually not a route to victory against Storm. Obviously you have to clock them, and that's what I'm choosing to do here. I'm choosing to clock them, but you usually need to disrupt, and ideally have a clock that you don't have to invest mana every turn into, but that's not what we're drawing. We're just drawing Fatal Pushes, so I think I have one more window of safety where I don't have to hold up Fatal Push. Now, don't get me wrong, they can still, play a land. They could have been slow-rolling a Mana Bear, and then I'm going to get punished for not holding up Fatal Push, but I also have to be proactive, right? I also have to be proactive and try to end this game, even though my top decks are not complying with my desire to do so. So I chose to go Shields down, animate the Treetop Village, and they don't have a 4th land, they don't have a cost reducer, so the decision has paid off thus far. Another land drop is not what we need, that's for sure, but it's Treetop time, yet again. And the Treetop is putting in work. This is the 3rd time he's come across the finish line for a solid 3. Opponent is ritualing on the end step, which usually means Gifts Ungiven. So, yep. Now, I am glad that I'm holding up these fatal pushes in this situation because they might need to go on the Mana Bear plan because they are a little bit shy of the natural land drops they need. So, indeed, they will. All of these things are mana related. They have 2 cost reducers, they have a Desperate Ritual, and then they have a Noxious Revival to buy back whatever it is they need. So, I went ahead and I put Baral and a Ritual into the yard, which means they still have Goblin Electromancer, they still have Noxious Revival. And if they want to use that Noxious Revival, remember they're taking 2, and that, you know, is relevant with the 3 per turn clock of Treetop Village. So, they've got the Revival, getting back a Ritual. Here's the Electromancer. This is actually okay for me, potentially, because they tap out for the, or they don't quite tap out, but they play the Monomorphose. We've got the Fatal Push. They've probably got something here, Remand, Unsubstantiate. We do know about Unsubstantiate. So they're going to Unsubstantiate their own Electromancer, which is a cute play, but because I happen to have double Fatal Push, I get to blow them out pretty hard there. And they get this cantrip with the Monomorphose, but what can they do with it? Well, they're going to keep digging. And they're going to Grape Shot us for 7, so that's not nothing. That's a decent little value Grape Shot, but it is not lethal, and it's not as scary as some other things they might have put together there. Unfortunately, we cannot draw a threat to save our lives, so we are leaning all of our hopes and dreams are on the shoulders of our good friends from the Ape Village, these veterans of many campaigns. And yeah, I mean, our draws have been miserable. All we can do is hold up Assassin's Trophy here, which is not doing much. Sleight of Hand into a land drop, into nothing. Okay. Inquisition of Kozilek, that's still not a threat, but it's at least a live draw. And we see they have Ritual and Grape Shot and Past in Flames. Well, those are some magic cards. And I took the Ritual because right now mana is still what's gating them. Obviously, they can cast the Past in Flames, but they can't really do anything beyond that until they find another land drop or a cost reducer. So we just kind of have to hope they brick on that for one more turn, while our heroic Ape Village finishes them off. So we get in for 3. They do have a Burrow. However, we get to trophy him away, and then we've got lethal. Then we've got lethal with the Treetop Village. So, Liliana the Veil, you're a little late to the party. So we're just going to get in with both of these things just for good measure, and that's going to be game. So our Treetop Village did 18 points of damage. Our Treetop Village, obviously the Quagmire joined for moral support at the end, but our Treetop Village did all 18 points of damage with them doing 2 to themselves for that Noxious Revival, which is one reason I left that card in hand. Even though there were some risks to doing so, mathematically that did increase our clock by a turn. You know, of course, as it turns out, we would have had exactly lethal with the Hiss and Quagmire anyway, but at the time there was no way for me to know that I would have enough mana to activate 2 manlands on turn 8, right? So, didn't end up mattering, but kind of cool either way, and a very anomalous game in that the Treetop Village went the entire distance. Like I said, it's fine as a threat in some ways, but usually you cannot afford to keep sinking mana into it turn after turn because you have to interact. But when you're not drawing interaction, you got nothing better to do than fire up the Treetop Village. Apparently, sometimes it's good enough. So I definitely don't expect to win on the back of Treetops. like that against Storm, but it can and does happen, as you just saw. So over to game 2, and this hand's very disappointing because there's a lot to like about it, and by a lot I mean the 2 discard spells. Obviously those are great. Those are some of our very best cards in this matchup, but the hand doesn't really have anything else going on. That said, it's on the draw. You know, we're going to see some more cards, see some more threats, so I chose to keep it, but it was a little bit of a loose keep. If we even had, you know, a Treetop Village in hand, this would be a lot better, right? But not the most exciting, and that draw of a Twilight Mire is brutal. It's yet another land that does not bring any utility that means anything to the table. So we will Inquisition. We'll see Double Barrel, we'll see Desperate Ritual, and Grape Shot and pieces of the puzzle. So here, they're a little bit gated on mana, at least for now. I think pieces of the puzzle, though, is still the correct take. Desperate Ritual is definitely one to consider there, but Pieces is just the 2-for-1. Pieces is just the dig 5, draw 2, very, very good against us. So here they can kind of run out a Brawl with impunity because they have another one where that came from. Hey, we draw a threat. We draw a Tarmogoyf. I went ahead and fetched there because that insulates Tarmogoyf from Lightning Bolt. So, and I suppose a Grape Shot for 3, as unlikely as that is as well. So that's why I did that. They have an opt, and they do have another pieces of the puzzle, which is just pretty savage, pretty brutal. I really hate seeing this card get ripped off the top of the deck, but that's what happened. And they get an Empty the Warrens and a Serum Visions off of it, which is nice. And we get a Scavenging Ooze. Alright, that's a decent one. So we'll Thoughtseize. We see the stuff we just mentioned, and we see other things that we already knew about. So, a couple interesting choices here, but I went with Empty the Warrens because it's just kind of not only the win condition, but also the stabilizer. Our Tarmogoyf has to present a decent clock, and it won't do it even against a medium Empty the Warrens. Those are going to block him forever, you know, until the game's over. And we can't have that. So I chose not to run out the Ooze into a potential Lightning Bolt or even a Grape Shot for 2. I think it is a little bit more valuable than that. And the other thing about the Ooze right now is there's no creatures to eat, so it cannot even attack into the Baral next turn. Here's a Ritual, here's another Baral, just to increase the storm count, I assume. Or maybe, you know, like I said, it's been a very long time since I've played this. Maybe the replay is acting up there a little bit. That seemed a little bit odd to me. Yeah, guys, I am sorry about this. The replay system is not always great with combo stuff, and I'm sure we missed something there. Maybe I even played my Skoos last turn. In reality, I really don't know. So this game is a bit of a wash. This game's a bit of a mess as far as getting a really accurate replay off of it is concerned, and yeah, we're just kind of stalled out. So we drew another Tarmogoyf. Let's see if skipping to the next turn accomplishes anything. Or is it just going to kind of totally shut us down here? Yeah, well, it's a shame because we got all the way through the replays, and then this one is where we're really falling to pieces. But suffice to say, I lost this game, and I don't remember exactly how it happened, because A, it was a month ago, and B, there were a couple Storm matches back-to-back in this league, so I couldn't really tell you how it happened, to be honest. But I remember it being pretty close, and I remember feeling pretty unlucky about it. I think they just kind of, you know, maybe we disrupted them and clocked them a bit, and then they ripped a Gifts Ungiven, let's say, something like that. So anyway, sorry for that anticlimactic game 2, but, you know, the replay system, even though it's back to functionality, it's still got all the good old bugs and flaws that we're used to, so good to know that some things don't change, right? So anyway, on to game 3. The third and final game of this match, which is the 5th and final match of this league, and we've got a good hand. We've got plenty of disruption. We've got plenty of answers. We just don't have a threat. But this hand is a snap keep. We see a very well balanced hand on the other side of the table with 2 mana bears, a ritual, and a serum vision. So they're a bit light on the meat. They're a bit light on the gas. But it's a powerful hand, and we will take the serum visions because that is the least redundant piece in their hand, and it digs them more toward that gas. So I think that's a correct take there. Spire Bluff Canal, we draw Nile Spellbound, sure. They drew yet another barrel. Well, we're going to take away the Desperate Ritual, we can kill their mana bears, and the Baral is super redundant in both ways now, both in terms of its functionality and the legendary rule. So it was either the Electromancer or the Ritual, but I think Ritual is the take there. They find a sleight of hand, that's a good draw. Steam Vents, sure. Alright, we draw another Nile Spellbomb. So we're pretty happy to just play that and pass. No need to quite rush anything at this moment. They've got a Serum Visions, but otherwise they're not up to anything that's all that impressive quite yet. They've got one of the Barals out. Alright, so on the end step, I'll take the opportunity to cantrip. We're going to clear out the yard, we're going to get a draw. Lily of the Veil's a good draw. And we got the third land. So we almost got... we're unable to play our Lily on curve 3 times in a row against Storm, but that Overgrown Tomb bailed us out. We are able to play her on curve. We are able to cleanly Edict, which I think is the play there. You know, again, even though we know they have another Mana Bear in hand, we're just slowing them down that way. We're doing something asymmetrical. I like that just fine. There's the Electromancer. And it looks like they're going to try to put a little bit of something together here before we get to run them out of resources with Liliana and pieces of the puzzle. Yow, that is a good one. That is a good one. So, Opt, Grape Shot, and Pyretic Ritual go to the graveyard. Desperate Ritual and Empty the Warrens go to the hand. Alright, Scavenging Ooze, huh? Well, we'll begin by ticking up the Liliana. We've got a lot of good stuff in hand, and our stuff is good enough to the point where I am pretty happy to pitch the Ooze here and just make this a Liliana game. I think that's the name of the game here. And then it's going to be Collective Brutality time. We pitched the EE because we want to kill this thing and we want to take a card out of their hand. As good as the EE is as an answer to the Empty the Warrens tokens, we do still have a Maelstrom Pulse for that. And we get to see another Baral, a Pieces of the Puzzle, and an Empty the Warrens. And they're just scooping to that. So I think that was a little bit premature, but, you know, with Nile Spellbomb out, with Liliana out, we did have, you know, we did have plenty of stuff, plenty of things going on. I think our opponent just felt that it was kind of all over from them, but I honestly don't think it was. But hey, I'm not. If our opponent wants to scoop in Game 3 of a league match, I'm not gonna say no. You should play it out. Not my decision, not my call. And I guess the opponent had just had enough of being disrupted. They probably wish they were against one of Modern's many, many linear and uninteractive decks, so they could just storm off in peace on turn 3 like they always do. But we're saying no. We're saying you gotta interact or you're gonna die. And we got him. We got him. So, yeah. There you have it. We've got another 4-1 on the books. This one, of course, like I've said a couple times, happened a month ago. It is part of my overall recent record that I've been touting, so I think I had a 4-1, and then a 2-3, and then a 4-1, then a 5-0, then a 4-1. Those are my 5 most recent leagues. Very good record, very strong performances overall. The deck feels just fine to me. You go on Reddit, you go on other centralized places of discussion, and you'll see people saying mid-range decks are impossible to play in Modern, or they're very poorly positioned in Modern. And that is simply not true. Now, mid-range as an archetype as a whole, yes, it doesn't make up that great of a meta share, but you know what? That's because Modern is so linear and so diverse. You cannot just play any old mid-range deck and coast on the power of your cards. That's not how Modern works anymore. So we might see situations moving forward, at least until Wizards prints better answers than threats into Standard, which or cards designed more with Modern in mind, which I'm optimistic about. They've shown signs of doing so, and they've literally done so lately. But until that balance shifts back in favor of answers, you might see situations like this where Golgari and Jund are both viable, but Mardu Pyromancer is more being pushed to the fringes. And, who knows? There could be a meta shift where Mardu Pyromancer is the deck to play, and the BGX deck's not so much. So you might say that mid-range, people are wrong when they say you shouldn't play mid-range. Mid-range is poorly positioned. But there might be a little bit of an underlying truth to that, and that underlying truth might be that mid-range, the card quality of mid-range is no longer sufficient to make up for its lack of ability to cover all bases on a regular basis. So what that means is that if you are playing a deck like this, you can get really, really solid results like I've been getting, but you have to commit to the deck. You have to know it inside and out, and you have to be on top of the meta. You also have to know what your realistic best configuration of your 75 is for your own playstyle, for your own local meta, and or for the broader meta at large, whatever the case may be. So, yeah, I mean, you're seeing the evidence of it on this channel. My results are consistently pretty good. It is only friendly leagues, but that's something that I've been meaning to mention. So I spoke with a very dedicated Tron grinder, a guy who's got thousands of matches under his belt with Tron. He tracks all of his matchups. He tracks his win and loss percentage. I think he tracks play draw, like he's going that deep. And this guy said that his win rate changes by 6% when comparing friendly leagues to competitive leagues. And again, this is a man who plays thousands upon thousands of matchups with the same deck. It's a good deck. It's a strong deck. He's an expert at it. So, I think that 6% number is pretty much what we should assume for most people. So if I'm clocking in at an 80% win rate in friendly leagues, yeah, they're only friendly leagues, but if we extrapolate a very strong competitive win rate off of that as well, which I think it's reasonable to do so, then we can conclude that this deck is well positioned in Modern. I'm giving you my numbers, and I'm repeating my numbers not to brag, not to exalt my own skill level. I'm a good player, but I don't think I'm on the level of some of the very top players in the format are in the game. That's just not likely. But what I am is a solid player, a decent player at least, and I'm playing a deck that's underrated right now, guys. Golgari is not getting the respect it deserves, and that should be absolutely fine with us, because the more we fly under the radar, the more people are not packing answers to us in the side, which is usually just some kind of grindy value cards that fit well with their progression. They're not packing answers to us, and they're not really expecting to see us. Fighting through the type of disruption that we offer, it is an acquired skill, and they can get a little bit rusty if they haven't seen too many Golgari decks in a while. So if people say that we are underpowered and not worth playing, long may those lies continue, because those lies help us succeed even more than we otherwise would. And like I said, my record recently is proof of that, and I say that not to big myself up, but to say that this deck is very, very viable in Modern. It's one of the best things you can be doing, in my opinion. I truly believe that. I think that decks like Arclight Phoenix, very cool deck, very, very sweet brew. I don't think it's as strong as people think it is. I think it's a fine deck. It's obviously viable. I don't think it's as strong as people think it is, and I think there are another handful of decks that are a little bit overrated in the format right now, and I think there are a few that are underrated, and I'm sure that we are one of the ones that are underrated. So, guys, use the footage that I'm showing you as inspiration. Go out there and take some scalps. Go out there and show these combo decks and these linear decks who's boss. You can do it. If you have any questions about how to do so, you can get at me on the channel. You can even consider signing up for my Of the Veil tier, which is a one-on-one, basically unlimited within the realms of my availability coaching service. So if you want to avail yourself of that, you know what to do. If you want to support the channel in general, you know what to do. Link is in the description below. Grimflayer MTG is on Patreon. So let me know what you thought about this way to show you footage of replaying the leagues, running it back on replay. Would you rather see me take my time and do one match at a time with a little bit of a slower cadence and explaining lines out a little bit clearer, and then I can upload 5 in a row over the course of maybe a couple days and link them all together so you can watch them all together? Or do you prefer this? More condensed format, all in one video, 5 matches, a self-contained league, back to back to back to back to back. Let me know what you think, and let me know how the replay stuff stacks up against the live stuff. I know a lot of people are really liking the live stuff. I know a lot of others are really missing the replays. I'm going to use both, but I do want to hear your feedback. You guys know this by now. I take all feedback on board. I'm always listening. I'm always trying to make my channel as palatable and as enjoyable and as edifying for you as I can. So, yeah, let me know about that. Of course, as always, let me know what you thought about the games, whether I made a couple mistakes that you saw, whether I could have taken some different lines, all of the above. I would love to hear it. I am sorry about the couple replay malfunctions we had with Storm matches, but hey, who cares? The replays are back. The replays are back. Life is good, and we got there with like 95% replay functionality, which is well above average for MTGO, as you well know. So I will go ahead and leave it there. Thank you so much, as always, for tuning in, everybody. I really, really appreciate it. It's still surreal to me how well my channel is doing, and I couldn't have this success without you. So thank you all sincerely, especially my patrons. And stay tuned to the channel. We're probably going to mess around in the tournament practice lobby sometime later on in the week, and then maybe we'll start up another league and take it from there. So thanks again, and I will talk to you soon. I hope you have a great night.